So yeah, that's me, but Shannon's done a good job of introducing me already, so we'll skip over that. So this talk is the ultimate guide to caching in Magento 2, or probably how much I can fit in 20 minutes. But the aims are to give you a solid understanding of caching and how they impact storefront performance, try and gain you back any wasted time or focus, debunk a few common myths, and hopefully as well, have a little bit of fun. So I apologize in advance if you're not a Star Wars fan. There are a few of these, but you'll just have to bear with it. Okay, so first off, can everyone hear me all right away from this? Or should I stand? All right, I'll stand here. Okay, so caching in Magento 2. So what is a cache? Essentially, it's the storage of data for future usage or retrieval. So something might be expensive or timely to calculate and output. We're going to save that to store and output later, so we save time. It's also been known to mask poorly optimized code. Loading Magento product models in a loop and then caching the output of a template file is not a good use of caching, for example. Okay, so why does Magento use caching? Is it slow? Possibly. That's maybe another topic altogether. But you've got to bear in mind Magento is a very large framework, has a wide range of features, it's incredibly flexible and extensible, and gives us developers almost unlimited power. But with that power comes a great many things to cache. So let's have a look at some of the data types Magento caches. You might not be able to read that very well, but basically what I'm saying here is that for the majority of work that you do with Magento 2, in most cases, it's going to be just these singular 5 cache types that really affect you. So I'm going to go through these one by one. So first one, configuration. So this is all the data that is stored in the store's configuration section in the admin panel, plus in config.xml files. Overall, there are around just over 1,400 XML files in Magento 2 that will be cached by the configuration cache. The only real exception is layout XML, which segues nicely into layout cache. So there are nearly 1,000 layout files in Magento 2 across the admin and the front end. And as part of the caching process, it's not just collating all the files, but it's working out what data is to be shown on what handles and things like the theme and module order, so hierarchy as well. Block HTML, this cache type is for just blocks or template files, and it's just to save re-rendering PHP on the front end. It only applies to blocks with a cache lifetime set, though, so any block with caching would have something like this within its block class. Can be passed by a layout as well. Next, translations. There are over 12,500 translations in Magento 2 open source in over 200 files. So again, it's just sheer size of data. These are collated from language packs, themes, and even modules. Lastly, full-page cache. So this is a bit like block HTML, but for the entire page response. Again, it's just to save having to re-render the PHP. It will only apply to pages that don't have a block included with cacheable equals false. So that looks a bit like this at the bottom here. So this is an example from the checkout. So the checkout is not cached for the full page because it's customer specific, therefore it's okay. However, if you're to find it in, say, a third-party extension, I won't name any names. I think most of them are cleaned up by now. But yeah, if you find cacheable equals false in a default.xml file, basically your entire storefront is excluded from full-page cache. If you want to know any more about any of the other cache types, I recommend just having a look at Magento's dev docs. Bear in mind all the information I just gave you there was about Magento open source, so Magento Commerce has another 100 modules on top, so there's even more things, files, etc. to cache. And as well as the different data types Magento caches, you've also got to bear in mind Magento's architecture, so things can be cached per area, per scope, if you've got a multi-store Magento instance, then things are cached per stores, per websites. Same goes for languages, currency, and even customer groups, especially whether you're logged in and logged out. So the point I'm trying to make is never underestimate the amount of data that can be in a cache at any one time. Okay, so let's have a quick look at storage options. So default, we have file system. So if this is the default method and When this is enabled, caches are just stored in the var cache and var page cache directories. Next is database. If you use this, caches are stored in the cache and cache tag database tables in MySQL. It's fair to say that those are not particularly performant. Whilst you might get away with it in development, you certainly shouldn't be using them in production. Okay, so better options. Redis. This is a key value database store for fast retrieval. And finally, Varnish. This is for full page cache only, though. So these are good. These are the things you should be using. And how you should be using them: Redis basically for all your caches bar full page cache, and Varnish for full page cache. Okay, so let's get on to the main topic, the main reason for this talk. What's wrong with flushing the cache in Magento? Just hang on a minute. Looks like my slides cache has just been refreshed. So if you ever worked with a Magento 2 checkout, you probably recognize this. All right, so that was a bit silly. Highlights a point though. It was a waste of time. We lost focus. It's not much fun waiting for spinners to load. I've also been led to believe that it can turn you to the dark side, i.e. other platforms. Okay, and we want our development experience to be more like this. So before we go into what we can do instead of flushing the cache, let's look at cache management. In the admin panel, there are 3 different ways to clean, flush, however you want to call it, manage the cache. We'll start with refresh. So essentially, if you tick any of those boxes and hit the submit button, what it's going to do is just remove those caches from the storage location. So if you're using file system, for example, and you tick layout and hit submit, it's going to remove any file to do with layout from the file system. If you hit the big orange button in the top right, the flush Magento cache button, what that's going to do, that's basically the same as ticking all the boxes and hitting submit. Again, it's just removing things from the cache storage location. This little ominous link here, this does something different altogether. This destroys the cache storage location completely, and I'll come on to that in a bit more detail in a second. First off, though, I just want to show you the same on the command line. So if we use bin Magento cache clean and pass a type, again, say layout, that's equivalent to ticking layout in the admin and hitting the submit button. If you run the same command but without passing a type, so you just run bin Magento cache clean, that's equivalent to hitting the big orange button. And if you run bin Magento cache flush, that is the same as clicking the flush cache storage link. So what does flush cache storage mean? It means the entire cache storage location is removed. So if you're using file system, it means essentially deleting var cache and var page cache, nothing is left. Same goes for Redis. It will delete the database that Redis is using to manage your cache, store your cache even. Okay, so what impact does this have? If you just clean all the caches, you just refresh them, you'll still have around 50-odd files left in the main cache and a few left in the full page cache as well. However, when you flush the cache, the impact is a little bit more like this. So let's have a little bit of a further look at how that works. First off, this is my reference environment. This is not scientific, but if you want to know what I was running, this is what. So yeah, disclaimer. You can't really see that, but what I'm trying to show here is my Redis setup. Basically, I'm using Redis database 1 for all cache, bar full page cache, and Redis database 2, see here, for page cache. And just as a side note, database 0 in Redis is storing my sessions. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to visit this page, the gear bags category, with a cold cache, and all caches enabled. And then if we run this command up here, Redis CLI info key space, it will show us all our databases and the amount of keys within each one. So we can see DB1, DB2 have number of items in them, and this key thing here, this expire 1, shows we have 1 page in the full page cache. There's 1 entry within the full page cache that can expire, so page. If we then run bin Magento cache clean, you can see that there are still plenty of items in DB1, not so many anymore. You can also see that our 1 page is expired from full page cache, it's been removed. But then if we run bin Magento cache flush, you can see DB1 and DB2 don't exist anymore. They've gone. They've been destroyed completely. So that's the difference. Okay, so let's have a look at caching impact and developer best practice. First off, page load. Again, this is based on my reference environment. Again, not fully scientific, but just to give you a rough idea. So if we have a cold cache, no cache at all, say we've just flushed the cache, and we load the gear bags category again, we can be waiting for over 15 seconds for the page to fully load. If we have a warm cache, so everything's enabled except full page cache, we're looking at just over half a second. And if we have everything enabled, including full page cache, we're looking at 100 milliseconds. So if we save a file, we'll do some coding in our IDE, save the file, switch to the command line, flush the cache, switch to the browser. Let's say that takes 3 seconds, plus our 15 seconds page load. That's 18 seconds from changing some code to seeing the results in the browser. So if you flush the cache 10 times in an hour, that's over 3 minutes lost per hour. If you do that, or that equates to 20 minutes a day, nearly 2 hours a week, 8 hours a month, or 4 entire days a year that you're sitting there as a developer if you work full-time waiting for pages to load. Now, obviously, I'm over-exaggerating and being a bit silly, but again, it's less about the time. Well, it is a little bit. All time's billable, right, or should be. But it's about improved development feedback cycle and our happiness and enjoyment as developers. And not waiting for things to load, because it's not fun. So let's have a look if we disable some caches while we're doing development work. So as I said earlier, full page cache is about 0.6 seconds. If we turn off layout, we add another 200 milliseconds, so up to about 0.8. And then if we turn off block HTML and translate as well, we're up to 0.9. So what we're seeing there is that translation and block HTML are fairly negligible. They have almost no impact on page load. And layout has a little bit more, but again, it's not that much. So what about the elephant in the room, if you like, configuration cache? Yeah, you're looking at 10 seconds. Pages take over 10 seconds to load. We're up to almost back to our 15 seconds, to be honest, if we just flush the cache. So what that tells us is configuration cache is the root of almost all slowdown in Magento 2. You can literally disable every single cache type bar configuration, and your page page speed will stay around a second. Right, so further considerations before we go on to the final best practice. Something I hear a lot, so block HTML cache usage. So if you're making changes to a block class or template, you at least need to clear the block HTML cache, right? Well, no. 90% of the time, the block you're working with will not be cached. Default Magento 2 open source, these are about the only things that cache with block HTML cache. So the main ones being the menu, the footer, product prices, and a few others. What about JavaScript and those lovely knockout files that everyone loves? Do you need to clear the cache if things aren't showing up? No. The only time Magento's cache impacts JavaScript is when you change require.js config files, and that's only with the full page cache. Otherwise, the only thing you need to be concerned with is your browser cache. What about installing, updating, or disabling modules? So running any of those commands, bin Magento setup upgrade, module enable, module disable, they actually clear the cache for you, so you don't need to run those again after. They even tell you on the command line now that the caches have been cleared. And this is my favorite. I may even, at some point, open a PR to Magento to try and remove this. Bin Magento cache flush cache type. So you can send a type to flush the cache. So I can do bin Magento cache flush layout. It works, but it still destroys the storage location. So basically, all the other things are destroyed. So let's, again, have a further look. Again, we're going to visit this category. Again, you can see we've got stuff in DB1, DB2. If we do cache clean with layout, you can see we've got less items. The layout items have been removed from cache, so there's 165 there instead of 190. And it's worth noting our full page cache entry has been removed. If you clean the layout cache, it will actually clean the full page cache for you, because otherwise there's not really much point in doing it. But yeah, if we run bin Magento cache flush layout, it's deleted DB1. Layout lives within database 1 in Redis, but so do all the other cache types of our full page cache. So it's just deleted everything. We've still got some of our full page cache files, but it's not really much use. So don't use bin Magento cache flush with a type after it. It's almost pointless. Okay, developer workflow then. So if you're working with layout, blocks, or translations, I'd suggest disabling these whilst you're working with them. So in total, I think I calculated around 300 milliseconds extra on your page load whilst these are off. That's still a lot less. You've got to have a lot more page refreshes to get back that 15 seconds than just turning these off. Configuration, you obviously can't turn this off. It takes up too much time. You have to clean it when you need to. The impact's too great. The only advice I can give, and I hate to tell developers how to manage their workflow, but if you can make more changes with files that require configuration cache being cleaned before you check your output on the front end, then I suggest you do that. But, yeah. Full page cache, you're going to need to disable this in most cases, otherwise you're not going to be able to see your changes. However, remember your code is not finished, it's not complete until you've tested that it works with full page cache enabled too. So here's a little cheat sheet. I'll be sending the slides out later, so there's a little cheat sheet there. However, there is another way. There is a very cool little tool created by Mage2 TV, aka VinICop. This is called Magento 2 Cache Clean. It's basically a drop-in replacement for the bin Magento cache clean command. If you do any kind of theming, styling work in Magento at all, if you're used to things like running watches for less and SAS files to compile, this is very similar, but for cache. It's faster than running bin Magento commands. It also means you don't have to context switch, and you can even leave on full page cache too. It will just check the files that you're working with. When you save them, it checks the file type and works out which caches to clear using its magic, as I'm going to call it. It's VinI. However, tools like this don't replace understanding, so whilst it's great, it is still good to have understanding of how caches work. So, quick summary. Should you use Flush Magento Cache or bin Magento Cache Clean? No. What about Flush Cache Storage or bin Magento Cache Flush? Definitely not. Look, if things get really bad, if something's not updating, I'm not saying don't ever flush the cache, just basically think about it first. Excuse me. So, for production environments, make sure your team or your merchants or whoever's in the admin panel understand the impact of flushing the cache on the storefront. Beware of third-party or any other modules that have cacheable equals false in the wrong places. When you're developing, remember that blocks with a cache lifetime set are the only ones that are stored in the block HTML cache, and that knockout and JavaScript changes do not impact the cache apart from that one exception I mentioned. But the main thing, if you take anything away from this talk, try and think about the caches that affect you based on the files you're working with and implement the best strategy. Or, if that's too much hard work, just be like these guys and use Mage2 TV Cache Clean. But please, please try and stop flushing the cache, because it makes me sad. And I'm sure you don't want that. If you're not going to listen to me, please listen to Master Yoda. So, fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to flushing the cache, and then suffering. But may the force be with you, because you're going to need it most times when you're working with a Magento 2 front end. I will actually be back here tomorrow at 11:30 to talk about indexing, which is the follow-on to this talk. There is a little bit more caching. There'll be a live demo, more Star Wars stuff, but yeah, 11:30 tomorrow. Finally, quick plug for something that I've been talking about for ages and not done anything with because I've been too busy, but hopefully by the end of this year, I'll have something to show with MageQuest. It's a Magento 2 tutorials, training, learning type website, so please check it out. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, we got a couple of minutes before we head off to lunch. Does anyone have any questions for John? In the back. So all I need to do is gracefully follow my face.
So I came into your talk a little bit late, so if you mentioned this, I apologize. if you have a site that's constantly losing cache, you see a cache page, you're losing cache, let's say every 10 minutes, every 20 minutes.
Yep.
Clearly, there's probably some module that's triggering an indexer in the background that's causing you to
Possibly.
lose cache.
My best guess is what I'm going to talk about tomorrow.
Well, how do you
that
trace
you've got,
that back?
That you've got indexing set to update on save, and people are saving products.
So what's the best way to trace that back?
Use update on schedule.
It's on update on schedule.
Okay, then it's possibly something else, but without seeing the code, I'm not sure. But yes, there's got to be something that's triggering it.
And what's the best way to actually watch?
Are you on Magento Open Source or Magento Commerce?
Commerce.
Commerce. Check the admin actions log, see if anybody's flushing the cache.
Fair enough.
Otherwise, yeah, you'd have to get a developer to dig into see why the cache keeps getting cleared.
These damn cache flushers. Who else has a question for John? Got one in the back?
This is not a question, but you were talking so fast. I couldn't most of it. Are you going to upload this video somewhere?
Yeah, I'll make sure the slides are available online later. I'll put them on Twitter, excuse me, Twitter and LinkedIn, and I'm sure someone will help me share them. But yeah, they'll be online.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Anyone else? All the way in the back, getting my steps today.
So you said, 90% of the blocks in Magento are not cached by default. Can you talk a little bit about how that's applied in Commerce with page blocks? Are those cached in the same way?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. How are the...
On Commerce version, page builder blocks built with page builder?
Page builder blocks aren't cached, but they don't really need to be because page builder uses knockout and actually renders the content in the admin panel and then saves the raw HTML to the database essentially. So the content in the database for your homepage, for example, is all actually stored as raw markup ready. So there isn't, it's kind of, yes, it's cached, but not using the traditional caching methods.
Got time for one last question. Who wants it?
Down here.
Oh, all the way in the front. Gonna break a sweat. Here we go.
I would just like more information about the 2 slides back, the training that you guys have coming up soon.
Yeah, it's not training, it's a website with tutorials and you could use it to learn training type of things. It's not training courses or training sessions, but yeah, I can share it with you.